60 Minutes.
Good evening, and welcome to 60 Minutes. On tonight's episode, we're going to talk about the Reagan administration and the Reagan Revolution. The Reagan campaign shifted power from the Democrats to Republicans, and the causes of the shift is from high taxes from many of the social programs that were created by Carter and FDR, the popularity of downsizing the government, and a revitalization of religious morals and values in the government. This revitalization of religious morals wasn't just in America, it was also in Iran, Britain, and even the Catholic Church. While in office, Reagan's main objectives were to fight inflation and high taxes. Reagan fronted his campaign with the quote, "It is time to reawaken this industrial giant, to get government back within its means, and to lighten the punitive tax burden." This means that Reagan wanted to revitalize the American economy, shrink government back after a long stream of social programs, welfare programs, and liberal reforms, and to lessen the taxes that had come from all these social programs. Under the Reagan administration, there was a severe cutback on social programs at home. There was also a harder line taken on Cold War issues. However, Reagan would always take in other opinions on a topic. Throughout his term, anyone who met him would always speak to how nice of a guy he was and how open to new ideas he was. Reagan led in a hands-off style. This means that he left many matters to his advisors. People liked this because of the stark contrast from Carter and his controlling atmosphere. In his presidency, Reagan also used the skills from his acting and speeches to connect better with the American people. There were also many elements that benefited Reagan. For example, on the day that he took office, the hostages in Iran were released. Also, 2 months after his inauguration, he was shot twice in the chest. After surviving, he gained the respect from America, his colleagues, and many of his political rivals. Right back to discussing the Reagan presidency on 60 Minutes after this commercial break.
You know, there's a 10-year delay in the Soviet Union of delivery of an automobile. And only 1 out of 7 families in the Soviet Union own automobiles. There's a 10-year wait. And you go through quite a process when you're ready to buy, and then you put up the money in advance. And this happened to a fellow, and this is their story that they tell, this joke. That this man, he laid down his money, and then the fellow that was in charge said to him, "Okay, come back in 10 years and get your car." And he said, "Morning or afternoon?" And the fellow behind the counter said, "Well, 10 years from now, what difference does it make?" And he said, "Well, the plumber's coming in the morning."
Welcome back to 60 Minutes in our discussion on the Reagan presidency. While in office, Reagan facilitated many massive tax cuts, the deregulation of the economy, and the reduction of many social programs. However, the military was still heavily funded to control the Soviet threat in Russia. For his economic policy, Reagan fully adopted supply-side economics. Supply-side economics argues that high taxes and governmental regulation hurts businesses. In theory, the economy would be so successful that tax revenue would increase because of the revitalization under supply-side economics. To support supply-side economics, Reagan passed the Economic Recovery Tax Act, which lowered income tax rates by 25%, capital gains by 40%, and investment income rates by 28%. He also passed the Omnibus Budget Reconciliation, which cut $35 billion of government programs, which reversed 50 years of liberal reform. Initially, his economic plans failed. his tax cuts had actually worsened the economy. So in response to this, Reagan raised taxes from his tax cuts, which improved the economy, stimulating it for the majority of Americans, and created 14.5 million new jobs. However, not all the change that Reagan brought was good. Many Republicans and Reaganites believed that environmental restrictions were mainly against businesses and actually hurt them. So, Reagan dismantled the Environmental Protection Agency, even though it knew of 18,000 cases that needed to be addressed that hurt the environment. Reagan's administration also had a negative effect on workers. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration was cut back, which stopped efforts to improve working conditions and make them safer for workers. Members of the Oil, Chemical, and Atomic Workers Union reported chemical waste being dumped into the Mississippi River, which was not addressed at all under the Reagan administration. President Reagan's reforms also failed to effectively help the poor. The top 1% of the country had 30% of the wealth. Their yearly earnings were 25 times greater than the incomes of the lowest 40% of Americans. And also, jobs mainly went to white males. African American males and women were often left out. This raises the important question of who was actually left out from the prosperity that was brought upon by the Reagan administration. Thank you for joining us tonight on this episode of 60 Minutes.